Hi everyone, it's great to see you all today. My name is Alyssa and I'm a Green Iowa AmeriCorps member at Matthew 25 in Cedar Rapids. This reading program is provided through a partnership between the East Central Iowa Council of Governments, Green Iowa AmeriCorps, and Matthew 25. It is sponsored by the Benton County Landfill, Iowa County Landfill, Jones County Transfer Station, and the Tama County Landfill. Today we're going to be reading a fun story about squash. Do you know what a squash is? Have you ever eaten one? A pumpkin is a type of squash, and so are other things like spaghetti squash, butternut squash, and acorn squash. You can use them for different kinds of things like pie. Now I want you to think about your favorite fruit or vegetable, and why do you like that fruit or vegetable? I'll give you a second to think. So I like bananas because they taste good, and I can use them in other things like smoothies and banana bread. Well, today we're going to be reading Sophie's Squash, which is a book by Pat Zietlow Miller, and it's illustrated by Wilsdorf. Sophie likes squash for maybe a different reason than you like your favorite fruits and veggies. Let's take a look at the cover and see what we can find out. So here we can see a tree and it has some orange leaves. So what season do you think it is? Fall, that's right. And we can see that there's a girl under the tree, so I think maybe that's Sophie. And here she has something, and it's got a little smiley face. And I think that might be the squash. Let's find out in the book. So, Sophie's Squash by Pat Zietlow Miller and Wilsdorf. One bright fall day, Sophie chose a squash at the farmer's market. Her parents planned to serve it for supper, but Sophie had other ideas. It was just the right size to hold in her arms, just the right size to bounce on her knee, just the right size to love. "I'm glad we met," Sophie whispered. "Good friends are hard to find." At home, Sophie used markers to give her squash a face. Then she wrapped it in a blanket and rocked it to sleep. When it was time to make supper, Sophie's mother looked at the squash. She looked at Sophie. "I call her Bernice," Sophie said. "I'll call for a pizza," said her mother. After that, Bernice went everywhere with Sophie, to story time at the library, to visit other squash at the farmer's market, to practice somersaults by the garden. Every night, Sophie gave Bernice a bottle, a hug, and a kiss. "Well, we did hope she'd love vegetables," Sophie's mother told her father. "Shh," said Sophie. "Bernice is sleeping." "Sweet pea," Sophie's mother said one morning as they made blueberry waffles. "Bernice is a squash, not a friend. If we don't eat her soon, she'll get mushy and gross. Let's bake her with marshmallows. Won't that taste yummy?" "Don't listen, Bernice," Sophie cried. That afternoon, Sophie's father took her shopping. "Sugar beet," he said. "Bernice is a squash. Why don't you pick a nice toy to play with instead?" But the trucks were too hard, and the dolls were too soft. Sophie clutched Bernice tightly. "No thanks," she said. "I have everything I need." After supper, Sophie's parents called a family meeting. Bernice lapped in Sophie's lap. "Why don't we donate Bernice to the food pantry before she rots?" her father suggested. Sophie shook her head. Bernice will last forever. Bernice seems a little blotchy, said Sophie's dad on the way to the library one day. She looks perfect to me, Sophie replied. At story time, some kids pointed and stared. What's that spotty thing? A boy asked. Her name is Bernice, and she's a squash, Sophie said, with freckles. Maybe Bernice should stay home next time, Sophie's mom suggested. Why? Sophie asked. She wasn't the one being rude. Still, as winter neared, Sophie noticed changes. Bernice seemed softer, and her summer salts lacked their usual style. Visiting friends will cheer you up, Sophie said. At the farmer's market, squash were everywhere. Firm, shiny squash. What keeps a squash healthy? Sophie asked a farmer. It's simple, really, he said. Fresh air, good clean dirt, a little love. Well, Sophie thought, I have all that. At home, Sophie cleared leaves from Bernice's favorite spot. She made a bed of soft soil, tucked Bernice in, and kissed her goodnight. Get better soon, she whispered. That night, while Sophie slept, the wind whistled and tiny snowflakes fell. When she awoke, the world was covered in white. Do you think Bernice is cold out there? Sophie asked her mother. I'm sure she's warm and cozy under her snow blanket, her mother replied. Sophie gazed out the window all morning. She was still there in the afternoon when her father came home with a surprise. You need a new friend, he said. Meet Ace. Ace was nice but boring. He just swam around and around in his bowl. But during the long winter, Sophie discovered that Ace was a superb silent reader who did fabulous flip turns, and he always listened politely when she talked about Bernice. Bernice was great at keeping secrets. When the snow finally melted, Sophie rushed to the garden. The only thing there was a small green sprout. It looked strangely familiar. Bernice, Sophie said, how was your winter? After that, Sophie, Ace, and Bernice ate lunch together every day. One bright summer morning, Sophie somersaulted across her yard, landed by the garden, and stared in disbelief. Bernice had grown 2 tiny squash. Wow, Sophie told them, you look just like your mom. Soon, Bonnie and Baxter were just the right size for Sophie to hold in her arms and bounce on her knee. Just the right size to love. The end. Wasn't that a fun story? Would you ever keep a food as a friend? Why is it maybe not the best idea? We know from the story that when Sophie's kept her squash too long, she started to get blotchy and she got soft and couldn't roll down the hills like she used to. So a food isn't the best friend to have because they might get mushy and smelly and you can't keep them forever. Did you learn anything else from this story? Do you know what happened when Sophie went outside and saw a little plant? Remember, she saw little roots in the ground. Sophie had buried Bernice in the fall in the good clean dirt and left her there all winter, and she was able to sprout roots and turn into a new squash plant. And we see it grow throughout the whole book, until at the end she has Bonnie and Baxter. What if Sophie had never put Bernice in the good clean dirt? Bernice probably would have gotten more squishy and moldy, and then Sophie would have to thrown Bernice away in the compost or in the garbage, and that would have been a waste. So we don't want to have to do that. What would you like to grow in a garden? I would like to grow carrots and potatoes and tomatoes and probably some raspberries and blueberries. What about you? It's important to understand the life cycle of plants because they provide us with the food we eat and the oxygen we breathe. Most of the food we eat came from a plant, even things that don't look like plants anymore. Bread was once wheat, French fries were potatoes, and even the meat we eat, like a hamburger, came from a cow that eats plants. What's your favorite food that comes from a plant? You can buy fruits and vegetables and other fresh food from a grocery store, but it's usually grown very far away. When you buy from a farmer's market like Sophie, you know exactly who grew it and how, and you know it didn't have to travel across the entire country to get to you. Meals in the United States travel an average of 1,500 miles from farm to plate, which is about the distance from Florida to Chicago. Some of our food even comes from other countries and has to travel across the ocean on big, slow ships. Buying from a farmer's market means we are supporting our neighbors and getting the freshest, most nutritious food. You don't even always have to buy fruits and vegetables from other people. You can grow them at your own house. Many people have a garden in their backyard, on their balcony, or have a space in a community garden. It's very rewarding to watch a tiny seed or plant turn into a beautiful vegetable you can eat. Just like the farmer in the story said, all they need is fresh air, good clean dirt, water, and a little love. Next, we're going to do some fun activities related to the book. The first thing we're going to do is draw the life cycle of a squash. You will need a blank sheet of paper and something to draw with, like a crayon, pencil, or marker. So the first step in the life of any plant is the seed. So we'll draw a tiny oval at the top of our page to represent the seed. After that, we'll draw a curved arrow to the next stage where the seed starts to sprout roots at the bottom, and the roots help a plant get water and nutrients. And at the same time, the seed also sprouts some leaves. So here I have my arrow and my sprout and roots, and I have this squiggly line to represent the ground. And then we'll draw another arrow. And in this stage, the plant has more roots and more leaves. And you can just kind of make them look however you want. The leaves help a plant get sunlight, which helps it make food for itself. And something you may not know is that most plants actually have flowers on them. So I will try to draw a flower on here. I might just draw a flower off to the side. plant, and then I just drew a bigger picture of a flower so we know what's going on. And then I'm going to draw an adult squash. Just like that. And then the squash has seeds inside, which brings us back to our first step. So we have the seed that we plant, and it sprouts roots and leaves, and it grows more roots and more leaves, and eventually it gets flowers that turn into the vegetable, and the vegetable has seeds inside. And that is a basic life cycle of a squash. So throughout the book, we saw Sophie playing outside with Bernice all the time, and the plants came from outside. So something we want to encourage you to do is to be like Sophie and go outside and have fun, maybe with your friends who aren't squash, but maybe if you have a friend who is a squash, you could bring them too. At Matthew 25, we have our own urban farm where we grow all kinds of fruits and vegetables. We have potatoes, we have peppers and lettuce and cabbage and all kinds of fun things. And you can check that out too and see a big garden in person sometime. So, do you remember what we learned from our story today? Farmers markets are a great place to get fresh fruits and veggies. Talk to your grown-up and see if you can find one near you can visit. You can also start your own garden at home with seeds you can buy at the store, or you can find seeds in the whole vegetables you buy. So after you cut open a pepper, you can see seeds inside that you can plant at home. Gardening is a great way to connect with the earth and helps you understand where your food comes from. Thank you so much for joining me today and listening to Sophie's Squash. I hope you learned a lot and can teach your friends and family all about squash and how a plant grows. Bye!